Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first session of OpenIT's live webinar series, New Autodesk Licensing Types and its Impact to Your Organization. My name is May, and I am your host for today. And very shortly, our presenter, Linda Cole, will be joining us. Before we get started, let me share with you a reminder that everyone is encouraged to ask questions. You may drop your queries in the comment section, and Linda will address it during the Q&A session of our webinar. If we don't have the opportunity to answer all the questions, or if there are any questions that need further investigation, rest assured that it will be sent to Linda and we will reach out via email or through LinkedIn. Our presenter is a business solutions consultant for OpenIT and has been an industry speaker since 2014. Based in Houston, she is a high energy senior level consultant with more than 25 years of diversified experience in sales, business operations, service management, project management, process improvement, marketing, and management in the technology industry. She is a proven leader with a unique blend of responsibilities in both small and large companies and possesses a passion for building successful businesses, providing extreme value to clients. Currently, she's helping clients solve their business issues around software licensing. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Linda M. Cole.
Thank you very much for that great introduction, May. And I'd like to welcome everybody. We have people joining us from all across the world. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're happy to be here today to talk about Autodesk licensing. We're going to go through just a, pardon me, introduction of the various different license types, some of the potential impacts that are affecting your organizations today. We're going to touch on some best practices on how you can manage those in your environment and just a couple of examples and next steps to help you in your organizations. So let's get started with what's going on with Autodesk and their licensing. Historically, there's been a lot of different licensing types with Autodesk. A few years ago, they introduced their Autodesk A360, which was a SaaS-based licensing, and that's where they were trying to move everything to the cloud, the application, the license management, everything ran in the cloud. When I talk to most of the folks I talk to, there's very few folks that have adopted this, but it still is there. But I think they've, are trying to respond to that. We still have some standalone licenses out in the marketplace. Again, when I talk to folks all over the world, both customers and prospects, some still have those standalone licenses, which are host based. But the majority of folks have moved on or have some other type of licensing in addition to that. Now, for our very large global enterprise accounts, many of them are on the token flex, and this still runs off of a license server. But instead of checking out a license, you're checking out a license, but it has a token value associated with it. And that's again for typically very large global enterprise accounts. So we're not going to really dive into that today, but I wanted to mention it because it is a big license type that Autodesk does. And in our subsequent webinars, we'll be touching more on that. So concurrent licensing is what most folks have around the world. And that, of course, is where we have a license server that's checking out the applications, and various users can check the applications out. They check them back in, check them back out. Again, it's a floating license or concurrent license is what it's called, and you're sharing. So multiple users are sharing single licenses. Well, I've got a little hiccup here in my slide. I apologize for that. So several years ago, Autodesk introduced what they refer to as named user subscription. And that is exactly what it sounds like. So instead of being a host bound license type, now your licenses are attached to a specific user. And so each individual user has their own portfolio. Now, when they originally set this up, there was some advantages they thought from a compliance perspective. We'll talk about that in a minute. But when we look at that, it really has some impacts because now instead of having a pool of licenses that can be shared across your environment, each individual user has to have their own portfolio or their own named user subscription. So, what we see today is because they introduced that, A lot of your demand over the last couple of years, Autodesk has had you buy named user subscription. So a lot of you have this combination of data, which is concurrent licensing and named user. So you haven't made the whole switch over to named user subscription. Of course, some of you have, but it really adds a lot of complexity in your environment when you're trying to understand what's going on across the entire enterprise and how can you optimize your license position with this. Now, in addition to that, Autodesk has made some additional changes in their licensing, and they have done several different things to that SMB and large customer market. One is they're now providing incentives to go direct. Resellers are still available across the globe. However, some products are only available direct, or some licensing models or licensing types are now only available directly. In addition to that, they're converting all of those concurrent maintenance and support or multi-user subscriptions to named user subscriptions. Now they're giving you options here of monthly, annual, or multi-year, but most customers are being forced into this new licensing model. They are offering some trade-ins. Originally, these were being the expiration date on your maintenance and support was back in 2020, but due to the pandemic and things that have been going on, some of those expiration dates have extended, and now we currently have an expiration of 2023. But a lot of that just depends on when your existing multi user subscription or maintenance and support contracts are expiring. They are still offering a 2-to-1 trade in. So for every one concurrent license, you can trade that in for two named user subscriptions. Now, the problem with this is Autodesk says that's our average ratio that we see to customers, but that is not what we see. We see that most customers have many more than two people per one license in their concurrent floating license model. So it creates an impact against your organization. Now, the other thing they have that's brand new, it's only been there about been out a couple of months, is the new Autodesk Flex licensing. And this is to target those occasional users, and I'll go into more detail about that in a minute. And then they also offer discounts on a multi-year or 3-year subscription. So on the named user subscriptions, as I mentioned, they have three different terms that you can do. One is a monthly subscription that is only available to purchase direct. So you would not be able to use your current resellers to do that. But this is a great alternative if you have any short term projects in your environment. If you have, let's say, you have interns that come in over the summer or over a break, you can, instead of having to purchase additional licenses for them that sit dormant the rest of the year, you can use these monthly subscriptions to handle that temporary flux. In addition, of course, you have the annual subscription, which is less expensive if you multiply it out. So it's about a 33% savings over the monthly subscription. And as I mentioned, there's discounts if you go to a multi-year or 3-year subscription. So under the named user subscription, you have various different deployment options, but you can the applications are still running on all the individual desktops or virtual desktops wherever they're doing their work. You can do that individually or you can script it for multiple, but it can be installed on up to 3 devices. Now here's the big problem with that is you can only have one active session running at a time. So when they first rolled out named user subscriptions, you were actually limited. So let's say you have a user that is working in the office and they have an application open and they leave it open and go home. And they either work on a home machine where they have the application running, or let's say they VPN, or they have a virtual desktop or what have you. So originally, they were not able to open that second license, if you will, on a second device, but they have removed that restriction. So it's important that we're able to educate the environment, all of the users of these products, to understand that the licensing is for one active session at a time. So otherwise, you're going to be into a compliance situation, and no one likes an audit. I'm sure several of you here have been through one, and let me tell you, they're no fun. So we want to make sure that we're educating the environment on what's going on and what that license entitlement is on the new named user subscription. The renewals are handled via the Autodesk portal. So if you already have named user subscriptions, you're familiar with this. But those of you who aren't, there's an actual Autodesk portal that you can log into, and this is where you purchase, renew, do account assignments, etc. They do have an option that if you set up an auto renewal, you'll get a 10% discount on your renewals if you pay in advance. And then they have if you have a multi-year subscription, let's say you have a 3-year, the other advantage or incentive to doing a 3-year subscription is that they will maintain that price without an increase over the term of that. The named user subscription entitles you for the current version, plus you can go back 3 versions. So if you're working on a project and now it's year 2, year 3, you can still stay. That's very important for a lot of people. They want to stay on the same version while they finish up a project. So this will entitle you to cover 3 versions back on the named user subscription. Now, I mentioned that Autodesk Flex is a new licensing model that just rolled out a couple of months ago. It is not available in all regions of the world yet, but this is really targeted for occasional users. And as in Token Flex, basically there's what we refer to as a token weight or a value that gets assigned to each of the products. And you can buy a bucket of tokens to use for these occasional users. Now with Autodesk Flex, this bucket of tokens you purchase, it has a 12-month expiration date, so it's use it or lose it. But the larger the batch of tokens that you buy, then it does a reduction. The current rate for the tokens in the US is $3. That is a different rate in different parts of the world, so you'll want to check locally what the cost is where you're at, if they've rolled this out yet. So effectively, it becomes a pay per use. And the other thing that's different about these is that they expire after 24 hours. So once you open an application, it'll ding you for that number of tokens, and you have access to that license. You can open and close it as much as you want during that 24-hour period. And that's the fee you'll pay, is just that token weight for that particular product you have. So the advantage of this, again, it's aimed at those occasional users. So you only pay for what you need, and it's easy to calculate what you're going to need with the usage data. And there's also no penalties for purchasing additional tokens. So in the enterprise token flex world, you have a multi-year agreement, and if you run out of tokens, then you purchase more, and the cost per token is much higher. In the Autodesk Flex, it's just based on the quantity of tokens that you buy each purchase or each bucket that you do. So this is a great alternative, again, for those occasional users. The applications are still running locally, but it handles that transaction up in the cloud in your Autodesk portal. So as I mentioned, there's a token value, if you will, for each of them, and I'll show you a list of those in a minute. So when users open an application, it checks out that number of tokens again from the cloud, and there's a dollar value associated with that. So it's easy to track what the costs are of that. So this is all public information on the Autodesk site. It has a list of all of the different applications and what the token cost or token weight is per day. And then you can calculate it. As I mentioned, it's a use it or lose it during that 12-month period. And even if you only open the application for 5 minutes, it's going to consume that token value for that 24-hour period. Now, Autodesk does have a token calculator online, but basically they expect you to know how much you need, and it just does the math for you. If I need X number of days on this application, what does that look like in terms of tokens? So you really kind of have to know what you need before you even get to that calculator. But we're going to show you some other ways that you can look at your usage data, to help you with that calculation. Now it's very easy to calculate what I call the break even point. So if we look at the token cost versus the annual subscription, we can easily calculate what the break even is. So for example, let's say we look at Civil 3D. The token cost per day is 9. So if we look at the cost of the subscription versus the cost of the tokens, if you have users who have unique user days, is the term we use, they use it more than 90 days out of the year, then it makes sense for you to purchase a named user subscription. But I think you'll find in your environment, if you're looking at the distinct user days, that you have a lot of users or a handful of users who don't really qualify for a named user subscription. Now, I do want to mention that not all products have tokens. So the collections like AEC, product design, etc., they are not available in a tokened setting. Those do require a named user subscription, and not all subscriptions are available in tokens. So there's some things that you can again, the AEC collection is probably the most common one where you have to buy a subscription. But what you want to do is you want to look at, if you have users who are today currently using an AEC, any of the collections, you want to look and see which particular applications in that bundle are they using. So if they're only using AutoCAD, you don't want to purchase a named user subscription for the collection. You want to just give them an Autodesk named user subscription. So it really changes the matrix and the makeup of how you assign your applications when you move through here. But if you have some reporting, then that makes this much easier in terms of managing your licenses. Um, so the other thing is, in the what hasn't changed is in the collections, they're not adding up all of the cost of all of the applications that are available in the collection. So there is a unique or substantial discount if you purchase those collections, if you're using more than, let's say, three of the applications that are in that collection. So because you can calculate that break even point, again, we can say, well, this number of users can use the pay per use, Autodesk Flex tokens, and these users can use named user subscription. Now, in addition to named user subscription, they have something referred to as premium services. Originally, this was only offered to companies who had a minimum of 150 users or named user subscriptions to qualify. They have reduced that recently down to 50. The big thing this provides is single sign on. And so if that's a requirement in your environment, then you're going to have to sign up for the premium services. The problem is, here in the US, that's $300 per user per year. So it's pretty expensive. It does give you some additional things like 24 by 7 live support, and it gives you some basic usage reporting, but it is pretty basic. They're coming out with a new version of this as well, enterprise, but they haven't put all the parameters around that yet. So we've been talking about the whole time, Autodesk is making a lot of changes very rapidly. So that's why we're here today, to help you keep up with those changes. So let's look at some of the potential impacts to your organization. So the first and foremost, what I hear from everybody is, this is a huge unplanned cost increase. So as you do your budgets and forecasting, you're looking at your maintenance on your concurrent, and you've budgeted it for the next year, and now all of a sudden you have to convert. And as I mentioned, most people I talk to, they have more than a 1-to-2 ratio of how many distinct users they have sharing their existing concurrent licensing. So that creates a big unplanned cost in your licensing. We, of course, as I mentioned, have potential compliance issues. So you have to pay attention to only one active session, as well as the region of use. So just like with your concurrent licensing, they have regions assigned to them, and that typically is where a lot of people get tripped up in an audit, where, let's say, they have a North American server and they have a global server, but somebody from rest of world, the license wasn't available globally, so they check out from a regional server. That would be a compliance issue. So that's, again, the potential that you've seen in concurrent, and it can also affect your named user subscription. Now, another thing, if you go and buy direct, your payment methods are going to change. So currently, Autodesk accepts credit cards and PayPal. They also do the electronic transfer, the ACH. They do have financing, but many of you are used to your current workflow or process in your organizations is, you cut a PO, it goes, you receive an invoice, you have terms, it runs through your normal workflow at your organization. So this is going to be an impact to your organization. How are you going to manage that? And it also encourages shadow IT behavior. We have a recent customer who they actually had 12 different Autodesk portals because different regions and groups in the enterprise had done their own purchasing. So then they all had their own Autodesk portals. Nothing would they couldn't even see it. They didn't even know what all they had. Of course, you can do an inventory to see where those applications are installed, and then you'll have to figure out if you've got more than one Autodesk portal. So changing payment methods and going direct and using these portals can encourage shadow behavior, shadow IT behavior. And so you just want to put a plan together in advance to handle that workflow so that you can keep control of that. The other thing is you lose visibility of your actual usage. So if you have concurrent licensing, whether you have a usage metering tool or not, you have access to that information through your license manager, and you can look and see what the elapsed time is. How much are your end users consuming a license, right? So you have some limited visibility once you move to the Autodesk portal. You can absolutely see what all you own, what your license, what you own. You can see what licenses have been assigned to various different users. If you also have the Autodesk Flex, you can see your bucket of tokens, but you can't really see whether people are using the product or not. So, the other thing that may be an impact to your organization is this requires connectivity. So, if you had an environment where you were letting your users borrow licenses, so they would check them out and borrow them and take them off network, you can still do that in the named user subscription, but you have to have internet connectivity when you first open the application and you first connect to that Autodesk portal. And then you can be offline for 30 days. So if you have people out in the field, you just need to be mindful that they will have to have some type of connectivity every 30 days. And if they're utilizing tokens, that's every 24 hours. So that could, again, be some impacts to your organization and require some changes on how your end users are utilizing those licenses. So, from a best practices, what do we recommend? First and foremost, it's to consolidate all of your Autodesk portals into a single account. If you're just now moving to named user subscription, you won't have to deal with this. You'll have a single account. But as I mentioned, because what's happened is, so if you were on the concurrent licensing model and your contract wasn't up and you needed to purchase any licenses the last couple of years, you were purchasing these named user subscriptions because they weren't allowing you to buy any more perpetual licenses. So now you have a combination of licenses between the concurrent and the named user. So again, those named users, they could be on multiple portals, etc. You want to go to a single account. You also want to align all your subscriptions and payment dates. Luckily, Autodesk allows you to do this, and it's fairly easy in their portal. However, you have to adjust the subscriptions to the same term. So if you have one subscription that's at a year and another one that's at 3 years, you're going to have to adjust them all to 3 years to get to the same expiration date. They do allow you to prorate that so you can pick and put everything on the same expiration date, but they also have to have the same payment method as well. So aligning your subscriptions and payments is doable, but you have to do a little bit of work to get it there. If you're in an area that does not currently offer Autodesk Flex, we do not recommend that you convert 100% of your concurrent users to named user subscriptions. We suggest that you look at your data, look at the usage of those applications, and see, do you have any of those low usage, occasional users? And then you can create what I refer to as a swap pool. So maybe it's your bottom 10% of your users, maybe it's 20%. Everybody's different in what that looks like. But Autodesk does not restrict how frequently you can change those. So you can assign a license to user A today, and you can move that assignment to user B tomorrow. So the licenses are not locked in any fashion. You can actually move it same day. It doesn't even have to be the next day. So if you create a pool of licenses, you can swap those licenses out as they're needed by these occasional users. It is kind of manual today, but depending upon your organization, like I've got, you see some manufacturing where they do very um, short usage on the floor, if you will. And so as they roll through a new project or turn up a new line, things of that nature, there's all types of things and all the different industries of why you might have these occasional users. Instead of having each one have their own named user subscription, let's just use a swap file until they roll out that Autodesk Flex or pay per use in your area. The other thing that's important is to review your usage on a monthly or at a minimum quarterly basis. You want to make sure you're identifying those users who are assigned a license that are no longer using it. So you want to look at the date last used. Did they leave the company? Is the project finished? Did they transfer to a new department where they no longer need that license? They're using something else. So it's important that you do that. And there's different metrics you can look at. You can, again, look at the last day used and then drill down into that to see what changed in the environment, etc. So I mentioned that when you have these combination of licenses, it makes reporting even more difficult because now you have a list of standalone licenses, maybe. You have your concurrent licensing, which you can get some reporting on, but and you have named user. So we need some way to do that, to look at all that data and combine that data. So we've done that in a Power BI dashboard where we're able to look at all the different data types across the entire portfolio and then drill down into it. We're going to go into much more detail on this on subsequent sessions, but let me just give you one quick example. So let's say we click on AutoCAD, but remember I told you we can look at the actual distinct user days, we can look at how much their usage was, we could look at elapsed time, we can look at all kinds of things, but um, and based upon that break even point, we're able to calculate what is needed in the environment. So here in this particular example, we selected AutoCAD. Only 47 do we suggest that you actually have a named user and that you have a large number of users in this case that are doing the Autodesk Flex. And then based upon their historical usage, we can actually calculate the exact number of tokens that you're going to need. Of course, the more tokens you buy, the cheaper the price per token. And so, in just this one example, if you were to convert all your users to subscription, it's 760,000 versus a combination of named user and flex, it's only 161. So you can see there's a huge impact to your organization when you're able to dig down into this information to really understand what's going on and what you need to move forward in your organization. And as I mentioned, we will go much deeper into this in our subsequent sessions. But for today, I think that's gonna let me go to our Q&A session. May, do you want to moderate
Yes,
me for questions?
thank you so much, Linda, for your presentation. All right, so we have several questions here from our attendees, and
Please.
we'd like to read the first question from Yogesh. Is Autodesk Flex type similar to subscription-based licensing of MS?
So no, Autodesk Flex is just think of it as a pay per use type of license, and you're paying by the day. So they're good for 24 hours, but it's like prepaying for so many tokens and then each one. So if you go to a carnival, maybe you pay so many tickets to ride a ride. That's one analogy I would use, but um it's not. I mean, we can say it's subscription based in that it has a 12-month term, but really think of it as a pay per use on a daily basis. Hopefully that answers. If not, chat some more in here. And let me just say, if we don't get to all the questions, we're absolutely going to follow up with you after this webinar, and we'll definitely answer every single question, even if we're not able to do it live.
Okay, our next question is from Jim. Hi, Linda. Since it sounds like Flex is for short-term users, would Autodesk try to get an organization on Token Flex currently to move to named user subscriptions?
I have not seen I have not seen that yet. None of our customers have reported that they currently have the enterprise token flex and that users that Autodesk is trying to get them to move, they've just been renewing their enterprise token flex agreements. Who knows what's going to happen as we move forward? As I mentioned, it's moving very rapidly. Their licensing is changing. But with that new edition that's coming up on the enterprise version, they may be leaning that way.
Thank you. And from Brian, is OpenIT planning on being able to track licenses that are hosted by Autodesk Cloud versus in-prem like my company currently has?
Yes, absolutely, Brian. We have the ability to meter but any of those, whether it's standalone, concurrent, or your cloud base, and we do connect directly to the Autodesk portal. We're continuously adding capabilities to that as we speak, but we're able to take the data from the Autodesk portal and marry it up to the usage data that we're collecting locally to provide some advanced reporting. So absolutely.
Thank you, Linda. And I think that wraps up
I
our
think we're out of
Q&A.
time.
Thank you so much, Linda. And to all our attendees for joining our webinar today. And since we're running out of time, we'll just send the questions to Linda. Oh, I'm sorry. If you have more questions, please don't hesitate to send your questions to our email address, which I will give to you in a while. So, a quick reminder that this webinar is recorded and can be immediately replayed after this live stream. We will also upload it on our website together with Linda's presentation. We are once again inviting you to the next two sessions of this webinar series. Please register through the links that are shown on the screen or visit the OpenIT LinkedIn page to add these events on your calendar. Please feel free to invite your colleagues and friends to join us and send your questions in advance if you wish to our email optimizeautodesk@openit.com. See you virtually on our next sessions. This is May, your host for today. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.